Welcome back. You should have completed the do now, looking at supply and demand for shoes. You should have drawn your graph for this first step as I'm drawing it up on the board. If we had a change where a new machine was created that could make shoes twice as fast as before, how is that going to affect the supply of shoes? Put yourself in the place of a shoe company owner. Right? Your job is to make as many shoes as possible. Does this make it easier or harder? Definitely makes it easier. You should be making a lot more shoes. Your supply line should move to the right. The result is a higher quantity, right? You're making twice as many shoes. It definitely should have an increase in quantity, but it should be at a cheaper price. Your price should have gone down. Today, we're going to be looking at supply and demand changing at the same time. So we're going to use all the stuff we've learned for the past week and a half, 2 weeks, and put it all on one graph and be able to explain why prices are changing and why they're doing what they're doing. These are the steps we're going to take when given a problem. First thing we need to do is draw the supply and demand graph with the labels of price and quantity, S1, D1. We need to make sure our demand line is vertical or horizontal depending on elasticity, and we need to show where equilibrium is. Next, we need to determine if the changes we're seeing are because of supply or because of demand. Is this going to affect the company and the producers, or is it going to affect the customers, the buyers? Next, we have to decide, is that going to be an increase or decrease in our supply or demand? Then we need to draw this on the graph. Remember, moving to the right is an increase, moving to the left is a decrease. And then we need to find our new equilibrium and find out how prices and quantity have changed. Here's a quick graph showing you how things affect price and quantity. So when demand increases, customers want more. There's an increase in price, but also an increase in quantity. When demand decreases, customers don't want the product. The prices will go down and they'll be less sold. When supply increases, when companies can make more of a product, the price decreases, gets cheaper, but they make more. The quantity increases. And the opposite happens. Supply decreases, it gets harder to make a product for some reason. The prices go up and quantity goes down. So we're going to practice some of these on Pear Deck. First, I want you thinking about chocolate candy, right? And the cocoa plant, where chocolate comes from, is struggling with deforestation and climate change. It might go extinct. So I want you to think, does this climate change, does it affect the supply or demand for chocolate? Then do you think this will increase or decrease the demand or supply for chocolate? And what would you expect to happen to the price of chocolate over the next few years? You can pause the video. Now that you got your responses in, this might affect the demand, right? Customers might change their view on chocolate because of what's happening with climate change, but it definitely affects supply. It's going to be harder to produce chocolate in the future. And it's definitely going to be a decrease in supply. And what you can expect is less chocolate being made and the prices to go up. They've already started happening. Chocolate has gotten more expensive over the past 5 years. You can see on the graph that I'm going to draw on the board how this supply change has led to the price change. Next, I want you to think about rent. Rent in Denver has been increasing for the past few decades. Why do you think that's happening? And I explain it like an economist. Use words like supply, demand, elasticity, increase, decrease, whatever it is. Explain why rent is getting more expensive in Denver. Now that you've finished your response, there's a lot going on with rent. Supply of rent is increasing. We're building all sorts of new apartments, new houses, new neighborhoods, but demand is increasing faster than we can build them. So although supply is increasing, demand is increasing even faster. And you can see how I drew this on the board. You will see that this is going to lead to an increase in price, but still not quite enough quantity as needed. Next, I want you to draw the supply and demand graph for soda. You can do it on this Pear Deck or in your notes. Then show the change if the government puts a tax on sugary drinks. Draw the change on the graph and explain what's happening. You can pause the video. You should have drawn a supply and demand graph like the one I'm drawing on the board. If the government puts tax on sugary drinks, that's going to be a tax on sodas, which make them more expensive to produce and sell. This will be a decrease in supply. The end result is higher prices, but lower quantity. Next, I want you to do the supply and demand for milk. Again, draw a supply and demand graph. Tell me what happens if the price of cookies decreases. What's going to happen? You can pause the video. Now that you drew your supply and demand graph, hopefully it looks like the one I am creating on the board. What do cookies have to do with milk? You don't need cookies to make milk, but it does affect the demand. This is what we call complements. These are two products that are used together. Not always, but often. All right, so if cookies get cheaper, that affects the way people demand milk. And if cookies are cheap, people will demand more milk, which leads to an increase in price of milk, but also an increase in quantity. For today's activity, you're going to do similar to what we just did. Practice drawing graphs, analyzing changes. What does it mean for price and quantity? If you have any questions, let me know.